ticking off one of my most requested reviews. I am, at long last, behind the wheel of a Vauxhall VX220. For those who've recently joined the channel, I started off with a Lotus Evora and a focus on that famous British brand. Now, those who know their Lotus history will realise that there are a few cars that have not bore the Lotus name, but are still close relations, one of which being the Tesla Roadster, and another being this, the Vauxhall VX220, known on the continent as the Opel Speedster. To many, it's simply the poor relation of the Elise, but this car has a really dedicated fan base, including Richard, who's brought this very nice example to me today. I've come rather close to reviewing these on a number of occasions in the past, and it's usually just been circumstances which have conspired against it. I'm very sorry it's taken so long, but I am very pleased to say that what we have here today is something quite special. Now, the history of the VX220 is an interesting one. The original Lotus Elise, much loved as it is, and rightly so, wasn't actually going to last anywhere near as long as it has done. It's currently about 24 years old, but it originally was never going to be any older than about 4. And that's because in about the year 2000, tighter regulations, particularly regarding crash and safety, were going to simply kill it off, and Lotus just did not have the funds to develop the car so that it could continue. Enter General Motors, who a little bit before had actually owned Lotus, and they gave them a big pile of cash and said, you know what, we'll help you develop that car and make the Series 2 Elise, but the price of it is going to be we want a version for ourselves. It's fair to say that the VX220 never really took off in the way that I think General Motors hoped that it would, and so after a few short years it was canned. Now, this car does have a very extensive modifications list, although looking at it you wouldn't really know it. The only thing that looks off is the fact that it's missing the badge off the front, so it looks a little bit like a kit car, even though exterior wise it's mostly standard. It even looks, you could say, a touch plain in this very popular silver paint finish. Not to my taste, but it's still a striking shape, and I think it's actually aging very well. This car was originally fitted with a naturally aspirated 2.2 litre engine producing about 145 horsepower. And that might not sound like a lot, but you have to remember when the Elise hit the world, it had only about 120. General Motors themselves realised that people were craving performance, and so they supplied a 2 litre turbo version with about another 50 horsepower, but this is neither of those. This one's had a significant reworking by a mysterious gentleman called Focky, a legend in VX220 circles, I'm told. This has now as its beating heart a Saab lump. It's a very close relative of its original Vauxhall unit, but it's just a little bit better, and this has undergone some significant modifications. The real headline grabber is the fitment of a set of ITBs. Yum yum yum. And this car is now putting out 218 horsepower at about 7,000 and a bit RPM. Little bit quicker than standard then. I'm very bad at running off mods lists in videos, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick it in the description below for those interested. What's most impressive is the fact that this car drives like an OEM product. Now, that I know for a fact is the result of a lot of hard work and effort, because when this car was originally picked up, it already had this engine in, but it was not running right. So this has been something of a labour of love. As with all small platform Lotus cars, there are a lot of things that need doing on this vehicle, most of them cosmetic, a few of them not, but generally it's still a car that can be enjoyed, especially on days like today, which we are very lucky to get because it's still January at the time of filming. The gearbox in here is a 5-speed JayEmm unit as used in the Mark IV Astra. It's not especially nice to use, but I am told it is at least quite robust. In fairness, I was never really a fan of the gearboxes Lotus used with the Rover lump either. It was only the later Toyota boxes that were actually any nice to use. One of the joys of having a vehicle with many parts sourced from a manufacturer like General Motors is the fact that you can of course do modifications and things like that quite easily. When you are sharing parts with hot hatch favourites like the Astra, well, there's already a well-established tuning market out there. One thing, unfortunately, that's not easily found for these cars anymore is bodywork, and quite a few of the pieces are now out of production and hard to find. It doesn't help when things happen like lights falling out and all that sort of stuff, so maintaining one of these can often be a little bit more difficult than it should be. It's not really just a case of having the budget for it, it's having the patience as well. Now, this car's owner recommends that you have a fund of about 1,500 quid a year to go towards general maintenance and the odd unexpected item. The reality is that you hopefully shouldn't have to spend that every year, and that means that you'll be building up a nice little savings pot to enable you to treat yourself, or more accurately the car, to those big things that we all lust after. Perhaps a set of ITBs like this one. It's very refined at gentle speeds and low throttle openings when you consider the fact that they are right behind your head. But it's not actually anywhere near as disturbing as I thought. The reality is, for me, cars like this can only ever be tolerated for about an hour, maybe two at the most. What is interesting is that although this looks on the face of it like an Elise with a body kit, there are a few subtle differences. There is actually a little bit of space behind the seats, just enough to fit the roof when you're not using it, but today we've got it in the boot. The boot itself is actually quite a decent size too. I believe when this went out of production, Lotus used it as the base for their Europa, which is kind of a more GT orientated Elise. The problem is, trying to make an Elise a GT orientated car is just never going to work, and for that reason the Europa never sold. I haven't actually driven one of those, so if you've got one and you want to see it on the channel, do let me know. And that goes for pretty much anything, to be fair. Heel and toe is beautiful, and the brakes on this are so much nicer than in my 111R. The first couple of years of the Toyota engine, they just didn't get the brake pedal right. There's about an inch or so of just completely dead travel, and it makes heel and towing in those very uneasy. The car is, as you might expect, exactly the perfect size for driving down a road like this, and the steering has plenty of feel and is very direct. It is a great fallacy that all unassisted steering is brilliant. Simply not true. I've driven plenty of cars with manual racks that are not very nice to drive, and an equal number with power assistance that are beautiful. It's just how the car is set up. In comparison to an Elise, this is actually a little wider at the back, has a slightly longer wheelbase, and is set up a bit softer. And I must say that this car is going straight into my top 5 list for best suspension setups to drive down this road. And to give you some context, this week I've been living, funnily enough, with a Range Rover. I think this is more comfortable. I was about to go for 6. I'm not going to do that because that's reverse. That would be bad. I think I'll go for 3rd instead. Although this car's rev limit is about 1,500 over the standard 6.5, you can still really enjoy it, even taking it up to only about 5 or 6. One of the few downsides of a vehicle like this, which relies quite heavily on power to weight, is that when you do add some weight to it, someone like myself, the performance is blunted a little bit, and so you will notice whether you're driving it solo or with a passenger. This car's got pretty wide tyres on it. They're 195s up front and 225s at the rear. It's got Hankooks on there, and they're doing a very admirable job. I would say it's not translating quite as much feedback through the wheel as in my old Elise, but that could be the passage of time making my memory a bit fuzzy, or it could just be the fact that these slightly wider tyres aren't quite as communicative as the narrow ones that I had on my car. As it happens, the owner has just confirmed it's not me going strange and old. This car does handle and respond a little better with the narrower fronts on, but the trade-off is this will stop an awful lot better with these wider ones on it. And I can also confirm from my own experience that with original size front tyres, these things don't always stop that well. People are often worried about things like this oversteering. Perhaps that's the ghost of the Toyota MR2, but the reality is, if you're going to drive one of these, or an Elise or an XE, the thing to watch out for is understeer. There is very little weight in the front of these cars, and that means, especially when you're driving on a day like today with a cold and greasy surface, if that front hasn't got grip, when you turn, it's just going to carry on. Now, that's not to say that the car will not oversteer. It certainly can with the right provocation, and there are a million different ways that you can get things wrong in a car like this. There are also pretty much zero ways that it's going to try and help you get out of the mess that you've created. There is no traction control or stability in this car, and the ABS is so primitive, most owners simply choose to turn it off. For a Lotus small platform car, it's actually pretty solid in here, and it is the perfect tool to dissect a road like this. Ultimately, the Elise is one of those cars a little bit like the MX-5. I like the Fiat 124 version, and I like it pretty much through gritted teeth. I don't like the styling, I don't like the engine, but the fact is that Mazda got the basic recipe so unbelievably right, it was almost impossible to bugger up. And I thought it was going to be a similar thing with this car, but it's not. What Vauxhall have brought to the party, and more accurately what Richard has brought to this party, isn't so much an improvement on the original car, it's just a very different take. Because this car's rev counter only goes to 7,000 RPM and the engine will go for another 1,000 more, it has a most ingenious way of telling you when to change up. 400 RPM before the red line, the engine management light turns on, and that, by the way, is by design, not by accident. You'd think that this combination of that manic little engine and the softer, more supple chassis would be an uncomfortable combination, but in actual fact, they work perfectly together. I would actually say that this is, gearbox aside, a much better car than my Elise. It's quite magical. So there we have it. Took me a while to get a VX220 on the channel, but I think it was worth the wait, because this one's pretty bloody good. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please like, comment below, subscribe if you haven't already. I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.